You know, so many children's literature have these secrets within them. And Disney, of course, and many of the lyrics in the Disney movies are very much metaphoric of this kind of thinking. That there's something in the heart that knows that there's something possible, that even in the midst of trouble, it's still there. It gives more than hope. It quickens something in us. When I was a little kid, I actually believed there was a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And I believed pretty much most of the fairy tales. But now I get it that it was a metaphor. And thinking that if we could just get to that pot of gold, everything would be all right, is a reference to thinking, and we all do this at some point, and probably more often than we'd like to admit, of thinking that if we could just solve this one problem, everything would be okay, right? If just this one thing were fixed, everything would be fine. It's rather like thinking, you know, if we just lost 10 more pounds, or we had cosmetic surgery, or we won the lottery, everything would be great, right? If only those things would happen. But the truth is, we can make things happen with our mind, but they will not be permanent solutions unless we have really changed our perception. So it's beyond wishing. It's a change of mind that makes a change in our life. So any cosmetic surgeon will tell you, don't do this if you think it's going to change your life, because it won't. You'll just be faced again with the same feelings that caused you to desire to do this particular procedure. It will just delay the problem. So I often tell stories about when I first began this teaching. I'm not going to tell them in detail because most of you have heard them. But how when I first came in, I was really good at manifesting things because I caught the idea of the principle that it is done unto you as you believe. I really took that to heart. And so I began to use my mind to believe that I could have certain things that were missing in my life to solve some problem. And one of them was I needed to pay a very high electric bill in Hawaii, when I was living in Hawaii, raising 2 children alone. And a friend came that afternoon with a check pre-made in that exact amount. But the next month I had the same problem, right? And then there was the time that after my divorce, I didn't have a car. And my children had to be transported, of course. I needed a car. I lived in Hawaii, up on the hill. I needed to get to work. It was quite a problem until one day when I was cutting someone's hair, as I did back then, this client asked me if I knew anyone who would like to drive their car for 6 months while they went back to the mainland. So I did that. But 6 months later, I needed a car, right? So this is a kind of a basic part of our teaching. It's an important one. You can cure things, but if you don't heal them, they will show up again. If you don't heal the cause, in other words, you can create a cure with your mind. Our minds are very powerful. You can make things happen. But if you don't heal the root cause, it will show up again. As my friend and other ministers said, it'll come back and bring its friends. And it will find the weakest link in your consciousness. So maybe you think you cured a relationship problem, but actually it might show up again in your bank account. If it's a belief that I am not enough. And that's the chronic belief of most human beings. But let's don't even talk about how they got it. But most human beings have a sense, I am not enough. And that can cause a lot of havoc in our life. So the reason this teaching is set in a spiritual container is because our sense of self is largely rooted in our perception of God, of Source. We talk about this all the time. And it's very important. That's the basic shift that our teaching brings to the world, is taking God out of the sky and putting it in here. Now, we weren't the first. The Hindus and the Buddhists, they have that same sense that whatever it is, it's within the visible form that it has created. God is within. But we also know it's above us, below us, all around us, as we said in the circle this morning. We're immersed in it, but it's immersed in us. The universe is saturated with God, and that means with intelligence and love and potential. potential for expansion. The universe is expanding all the time. Ever since the Big Bang or the first I am, it has been expanding. And locally, that means evolution. Locally, that means we are growing. We can change. We are ever becoming more of our innate nature, or can be, but we have to get involved with it, with our perception of self as well. So the idea that God, and if you don't like the word, use spirit, is personalizing itself as you and as me, is life-changing. That one little bit of information is enough to change a life when we start to consider exactly what that means. It can shatter your old ideas, which is a good thing. But in the process, we can feel a little unsettled because, beliefs make us feel safe, right? Even if they're incorrect, even if they're very limited, we can feel safe. And so Emerson wrote in his essay on the Oversoul something really wonderful about allowing our greater self to come through. He says, we misrepresent ourselves as the thinking, planting, eating self. But if we would allow the soul, our core being, our real self, if we would let it appear through our actions, he said, it would make our knees bend, knock us to the ground, if we actually saw who we really are. And this is what I love. I remember this quote from way back. It says, when it breathes through your intellect, it's genius. When it breathes through your will, it's virtue. When it flows through your affections, it's love. It's becoming what we give it to do. So he's telling us, let yourself play with the idea that you are more than you ever thought you were. That there's more possible for you than you ever thought. He's telling us of our true self, the one who is the way in for spirit to continue the expansion of itself in the universe. Isn't that something to think about? That you're actually an answer to God's prayer? You're an answer to a universal necessity. That how could this source of all life diversify itself, multiply itself, and reveal itself except through that which it makes out of itself? That's us. That's a very beautiful thing to know. So when we have a problem, what's the first thing we want? We want it to go away. Right? Let's get rid of it. And there's a place for that too. It might seem logical that we want it to go away, but until we understand that the problem is some kind of directive that our unconscious has created. See, here's the thing that I love about this teaching. I do not believe we are ever truly trying to hurt ourselves. I do not believe we are trying to smack ourselves down or teach ourselves lessons. I believe it all comes from what we're aware of. And the more we're aware of the goodness and the blessings and the joy and the possibility, the better our lives get, because we start thinking differently. But if it's a health problem or a money problem or a relationship problem or anything, the message, the directive from the problem itself is always this: reclaim yourself, love yourself more, give yourself credit for who you really are. Let your soul reveal. Let it shine. As we say, let the light shine. Claim your rightful inheritance as the breath of God flowing through you. As long as we think of God as some guy in the sky, that's hard to relate to that. But when we realize we're talking about a formless, changeless, birthless, deathless power, energy, the energy of love and intelligence, it gives us a different sense of what we're working with. So Ernest Holmes said, as I said in the treatment, life is for us and never against us. Life is not divided against itself. It is constantly producing more out of itself just for the joy of it, just because it can, just because it must, just because that's its nature to become. And Ernest Holmes, the founder of this teaching in modern times, said, if you don't have any problems, you're probably dead. Because we call them problems, but they are moments of opportunities to increase our self-awareness. Truly, that's what it is. Every time we get stuck, if we just go back to that, who am I? And that's called accountability. when you look at how you've been off in your thinking, right? How you may have been gossiping about yourself. People like to gossip. You know what gossip is? Gossip it can be an exaggeration. It can be an outright lie. It can be an attempt to lessen something or to bring it down. We know that. But do you ever gossip about yourself? Think about this. This is real. I find this quite humorous. But you're not laughing. It's just like, ugh. Okay, here's how you gossip about yourself. You say things like, I'm not good with money. Or, I'm not suitable for a lasting relationship. I'm too set in my ways. Or, I can't get a handle on my emotions. I can't stop being angry. That's gossip. You know why it's gossip? Because there's no truth in it. It's just a bunch of made-up ideas. And why are they not powerful? Because they're changeable. Consciousness is always changeable. Ideas are always changeable. Beliefs are always changeable. And we have techniques in this teaching to change them. There are ways to approach this that are practical and not hard to do. It does take some attention. It also takes a belief that we are actually that powerful, that we create our own experience through what we believe about ourselves. All right? So, you can talk yourself out of it. And that's what real prayer is. Real prayer is to tell the truth about yourself to yourself. Ernest Holmes used to say, when you have a problem, don't talk to anybody else, talk to yourself. Go have a heart-to-heart with yourself. Sit down and say, let's stop gossiping. Let's tell the truth about ourselves. And telling the truth about yourself, even if you don't believe in the moment, because it's in there as your spiritual DNA, it quickens and you will feel better. Don't you feel better when you do a real spiritual mind treatment or what we used to call prayer? You feel better. That's the purpose of it. It's not to get God to do anything. It's to get us to wake up to what God is already doing and attempting to do by means of us. So Emerson said, prayer is a soliloquy of a jubilant soul. I love that. You know, soliloquy is just self-talk. One person speaking, jubilant soul. So you may be going through something really challenging, and maybe it hurts, and maybe it brings up junk from the past, but a jubilant soul can get above it in the moment and claim, I am joy itself. My life is worth living. I love myself. I love being me. These things are very Disney-like, but they're very powerful and very true. And they raise our energy. Our body is better because of it. Our brain is better because of it. Because spiritual DNA is healing. It's not a cure, it's healing. In other words, it replaces what was with what it is, which is wholeness. The wholeness that we always are. If we were not, you know, I told you when I went to Hawaii, I fell on the lava rock and had a great, big, huge boo-boo. Ugly, big. You know, this is funny because just a few weeks before I was saying, I haven't had a skinned knee since I was 3 years old. Well, I got one. It's healed. How could that happen? I mean, it was scary. It was big and ugly. How could it be healed already? Because of the wholeness matrix in me. Everything in my body went, let's fix that, right? Well, it's the same thing with love or peace or joy. The mind says, let's fix that. How can we do it? By claiming the wholeness inside of ourselves, the spiritual sense that we are, the spiritual wholeness that we are, which means we are the love we're seeking. We are the way for abundance to happen. See, we already are everything that we think is missing. I always say to people, if you think something's missing here, you're not bringing it. Because it's all perception, right? It's all perception. Other people think, oh, it's all here. Other people say, I don't like this. It's all perception, and it's coming from who we think we are. That's the whole thing. And I know this isn't always the easiest thing to hear, but it's liberating. This is power. You claim power by claiming your part in the experience you're having. So I thought of a couple of things about prayer, that it's never a petition or an asking. It's always a declaration. And it begins with some affirmations. I invite you to say this out loud. This is a good one. I am the wealthy inheritor of the kingdom of possibility. What did the man Jesus, the great master teacher, said? The kingdom's within. The kingdom has already been given. The kingdom is spread out in the world, and you can't see it, he said. This is in the Gospel of Thomas. You can't see it. Why? Because we're blinded by our own perception of limitation. The kingdom has already been given, and that's the field of infinite potential that quantum physics is starting to talk about. That is our natural inheritance. That's why we can change things. That's why we can invent, discover, go to the moon and beyond. That's all came from the human mind. It's stunning when you think about what we've done. So that everything that we call a problem can be solved with some new ideas. Here's another one. I am always evolving upwards. Oh, you'll like this one. My life is an original masterpiece. Really? Yeah, okay. So here's the great secret. This is the great secret. God does not answer prayers more quickly for one person or another. There's no judging and accounting. There's no point system. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to earn anything except by consciousness. Ernest Holmes said, you earn everything by right of consciousness. That's the coin of the realm. That's the spiritual coin, is consciousness, right? So God doesn't play favorites, but what it does is match us. You've ever seen those telethons where some corporation calls up and said, we will match every donation of $1,000. That's what God's doing. Because as principle, as natural law, God is both presence and principle. Presence as us, aliveness, and the awareness of being throughout the universe. Principle as how it makes things happen. So that's called the creative process. So as principle, it matches us, and that means it responds to us by corresponding to our most energized belief. Doesn't care if it's positive or negative. It doesn't know anything outside of itself. It only knows to do, and it does by means of the vehicle it has created to express itself, okay? So it matches us, and that means that we can never have an experience that is higher or lower than our best idea about ourselves. What we have given God to match. So we have to remember that God, as intelligence, acts as natural law, and as such is entirely impersonal. It's personal to us as our being, but it's impersonal as to how it responds to us. There again, no judgment. No bringing up the past. It only knows now. It only knows to do as law. It's just, that what we tell children all the time, it's like electricity. It can cook your meal or it can electrocute you. It depends on how you work with it, right? It's impersonal. That's the way the law is, all right? So this is why the impersonalness of the law is why good things can happen to bad people and bad things can happen to good people. It's the law at work bringing through us the best ideas we have about ourselves. So there's no judging force, no outside looking at us from afar. It's a function of mind to create out of itself. It's a natural law. All right? So this awareness is part of the great awakening of humanity. This is what lots of young people are waking up to. Humanity's created a lot of problems, and it is seeking answers. And there are as many ideas for cures as there are problems, and some of them are really ingenious. There are really some ingenious things happening out there. But until we heal the real cause, which are our collective beliefs about God, and our relationship with the universe, until we heal that, we will never find that pot of gold. It'll be always elusive, just out of our reach. There will just be another set of problems to be solved. So if you think about everything on the planet right now that's a problem, what are they except results of what we believed? That's all they are. That means they're changeable. That means a new idea will bring up new energy and new possibilities and new solutions. So let's do our part and begin again today to think up. Let's think up out of where we thought this morning or yesterday. Raise the ante. Raise the spiritual ante in our own lives. Think above the circumstance. Think above the limitation. See it as an opportunity. And let's get back into right thinking. What is possible? Who are we in this situation? What can we imagine? What do we really believe? That's the way in for lasting change, and it's the only way it's ever going to happen. So what I see in this teaching is a great opportunity for humanity to actually create a whole new way of being together in the world. All the little pieces are in every spiritual teaching. There's something in every spiritual teaching at the core. We call that the esoteric, the beginning of all enduring spiritual teachings. It's pretty much the same. But the exoteric is where it got diversified with rituals and cultural beliefs, and you should eat this and not that, and we're better than them, right? That's the exoteric. But the esoteric is pretty much the same thing, even though the languages are a little bit different, but they point to here, right? That's where they point, and that's where we have to go. I want you to say out loud as you can, I love myself.
I love myself.
And you know how we were taught not to do that? Yeah, don't be so big, don't strut. Let's strut. I love myself because I love God being me. When I say I love myself, I'm humble about it. I'm not talking about ego. I'm not talking about accomplishments or titles. I'm talking about just the sheer joy of being alive, knowing I had nothing to do with it. Right? Nothing to do with it. It's a miracle. Everything about life is a miracle. Einstein said either everything's a miracle or nothing is. Well, everything is in the sense of we have nothing to do with it, and yet we interact with it all the time. It's given us its power to work with, so let's do something wonderful with it, beginning right inside ourselves. Let's just know this truth, and let's know it together. Let's take this seriously one more time. That our natural birthright is to be loving and kind and joyful and powerful and creative, to be wealthy and healthy and vital, to live beyond any culture, any belief, any religion, to live as ourselves, fully free and fully available for good and more good to come through us. Can we stop gossiping about each other and ourselves and lay down those silly ideas and bring up the truth? We are all wonderful beings. We are all uniquely expressing, but it's all good. We are all seeking a greater sense of who we are. And let's validate for each other that that's right here. We can achieve it today. We can leap out of the past today, right now, by simply saying, I love myself. I love this life. I love what's possible. And I now let go of that lacking, worrying, gossiping self that has no place in this becoming universe. I let go of it, and I claim my rightful inheritance of peace and plenty and prosperity and power. And so I let everybody off the hook, including myself. And I say yes to what's wanting to happen through me. And something wonderful is wanting to happen through you. Every one of us, uniquely ours to do. Say yes. And loving the self brings it forward, unlocks what's held in abeyance in the soul. Loving the self unlocks the treasure house, the infinite reservoir of supply that is a universal quality that turns itself into money and molecules or things or whatever is needed. Loving the self without conditions unlocks our potential and gives us a way. to reveal it. And so if we do nothing else, male, female, old, young, child, grandma, grandpa, of any nationality, any ethnicity, we're all one. We're all the same thing. We're just flowers in the garden. Different colors, different configuration, all God, all good. If we do one thing, simply love who we are and let it be. Let it come forth, knowing that it must. And it will bring us friends, love, joy, peace, intelligence, creativity, health, radiance, prosperity, creativity, and beautiful new ideas for a beautiful new world. And so accepting all of this, we let it filter through our thinking mind. We let it come up from our knowing heart. We let it quicken and trigger our spiritual DNA and see what it does. Knowing this makes me very grateful to be a part of this movement, this new thought movement, this teaching, this possibility. And so I begin again, as we all do, from the inside out, right now, in gratitude for this and so much more we say, and so it is.